So Jeanne, this is your dad's autobiography.
My dad's, you could call it political biography.
Okay.
It's the story of his political life, not his personal.
Yeah. Jeanne Nazareth was quite a known political figure in the Kenya of the 50s, 60s.
Yes, in pre-independence Kenya more. He didn't have a career in post-independence Kenya, but he was an important figure even in the achievement of independence. He was a prominent figure in the Lancaster House Conference in 1960, and from editing his book I realized that he made a very important contribution in a boycott of Parliament, a joint boycott by the Asian and the African members, which led directly to the holding of the Lancaster House Conference.
I see.
But he was a maverick politician. He seemed always to be on the
losing side?
On the losing side. My brother invented this term, actually. I mean, not invented, but called him a maverick politician. He was a defender of unpopular causes.
Probably he couldn't help it given the times and situation that he was in. See, all of us are creations of our own times, no, in that sense.
I don't know, he wasn't really a politician. He didn't have enough of a sense of how to maneuver with people.
I see.
And in the recent articles which were published, a compilation by Benegal Pereira, published in Awaz, which is an East African magazine dedicated to South Asian issues. He has very interesting psychological analysis. An article by Angelo Faria.
Faria.
And he takes a kind of psychological approach to my father's personality and career, and has very interesting insights into the way my father proceeded.
Give us a thumbnail bio sketch of your dad. If I'm not mistaken, he was born in Africa, studied in Bombay, then in the UK.
My father was born in Nairobi, and then at an early age he went with his mother back to Goa. His book has a short, begins with a biographical, not sketch, but actually description of his early life.
1920s?
He was born in 1908.
Oh, wait.
And he even talks about being taught Portuguese, which he never succeeded in learning. But he did learn Konkani, and he never lost his Konkani. Then he went to St. Mary's School in Bombay, and he couldn't speak a word of English at that point, and he was laughed at. He had a very nice story about my father's very feisty character. He always was, even though he was basically a very shy man. But that he tells a story. It must have come from my mother, because my father never talked much about his self. He talked about his interests, but not about it. And apparently he said to these boys who were teasing him, "I'll give it to you one kick." That story is a legend in our family, but it expresses my father, and it shows the distance he came, because he became what I consider a good writer of English, though people might find his book quite hard work in a way, though I began to appreciate it a lot as I worked on it. Thanks to Frederick Nerona,
no, not at all.
The idea of an ebook and brought this book back to life. It exists, as you know, in its printed edition.
So then he goes to the UK to do his Bharat law.
He was told that he couldn't practice in Kenya unless he qualified in Britain. So
by Tommy Rabbi M.R. D'Souza.
Tommy M.R. D'Souza was so generous as to loan him the money, interest-free. And on that money, my father studied from 1930 to 34, I think, or 3 or 4 years in Britain, where he was called to the bar, and then he returned to Kenya to practice. So he started his working life with a considerable debt.
And then he talks about his entry into politics, which happened not quite by design, not by his design.
No, Dr. A.C.L. D'Souza, who was a very prominent Goan
Yeah.
Actually got his supported his entry into one of the Indian associations, which were constituent bodies of the Congress. That's how it happened.
But unlike most Goans, he didn't stick within Goan politics alone. He spoke for the Indian cause, Indian diaspora
yes,
cause.
He regarded himself as an Indian as much as a Goan.
Goan
politics were another thing, I understand. You know, in themselves they were fractious, that's the word, isn't it?
True.
There was a lot of fighting, and he was actually advised to steer clear of Goan politics. No, he was much more engaged in the national scene. Goans, you know, occupy this ambiguous position in Kenya. They were categorized separately from Indians, and one would hear Indians and Goans, you know, and many Goans thought themselves different from Indians, and were in many senses different because, you know, the Catholicism and greater degree of westernization. But my father was involved in Indian politics, and he got a lot of support from the Indian community. And
then he went on to be a member of parliament.
Yes, he was a member of parliament from 56 to 60. He was elected in the Western Electoral Area. And these stories are told vividly and interestingly in his book, you know, and I learned them for the first time. I must admit, I hadn't read the printed book very carefully. And so I thoroughly enjoyed editing.
He's written it with so much detail, everything.
And I learned about my father. But he'd written about it in more detail, which was removed because the book became enormous. And, you know, the appendices alone occupy a large amount of space.
But the amount of documentation that he kept was particularly amazing. Every letter, every news report, every debate, every statement he made in the house.
When my father died, and my mother eventually left Kenya, we carted reams of paper out to the recycling. We would take bootloads and bootloads to a place called Rosie's. And they would convert it. I'm not sure I should be saying this, but that it was converted into toilet paper. My brother said he would use Rosie's toilet paper.
This is in Kenya?
Yeah, the other thing is, of course, there were legal files. Yeah. There's a rule about not destroying files for, I think it's even 20 years. So you would be astounded at the amount of paper that we removed from that house. Newspapers, you know, kept for clippings, and every letters were even carbon copies of letters that were sent out.
I see.
Every document was retained.
So he passed away in Kenya itself?
Yes, in 1989.
89. He stayed on there that long?
Yes, always leaving and always staying.
I see. So he stayed on in the power, he stayed on as a member of parliament in a very crucial transitionary phase.
Absolutely, yes. It was a very crucial. I think the Indian community was not effective, and that again is a big point in this book, you know, the divisions in the Indian community which simply made it
difficult.
Yeah, and my father even uses the term the Congress was a laughing stock, because they never held to their resolutions, you know, they were so self-serving, and the story of the Congress emerges brilliantly from this book, because Congress records are quoted in detail, too much detail, but you know, the story is very fully told in this.
This is which Congress?
The East African Indian Congress, modelled on Congress of India.
I see. As a person, what strikes you about your father when you kind of remember him?
I think it's his anger. My father was so much anger. I don't know why. And yet he was so generous and could be so happy. But it just was such and you get so angry about injustice and abstract things, but in such an angry way.
I guess, as I was saying, we are products of our own time. Sometimes the times decide our nature in that sense. No? And he came at a very trying moment of history. Because
he had a very hard childhood, you see.
I see.
He never really had a family life. My father had a difficult life. I suppose he was successful in a sense, but as you say, we're the product of circumstances, I would say, not our times.
So you have any regret for not staying on in Kenya, or what?
Yes. I wish I'd never gone to university in England. I wish I'd stayed in Kenya. I wish I'd worked in Kenya. I'd probably been horribly frustrating because, Kenya just seemed to go wrong, all the ideals, as in South Africa, all the gods at clay feet, and then so many horrible things happened in Kenya, and then, there wasn't really freedom of speech. So actually, no, I probably was a good thing. Probably a good thing I got out of Kenya, I might have had a very difficult, if one was an idealist of any kind, one would have had a terribly difficult life.
True. The road not taken. But who were the contemporaries of your dad's, Fritz D'Souza and
Fritz is considerably younger than my father. Huh? Fritz is sort of between me and my father.
I see.
He was sort of 20
okay.
year difference. And Pio Pinto likewise. My father's contemporaries were people like Arvind Jamidar. Shamsuddin is a very important figure. He came before my father. A.C.L. D'Souza again is before my father. Who are other people? Trivedi, Zafruddin, they're all figures in my book. Oh, N.S. Mangat is a very interesting figure. He was, his speeches are quoted in actually quite a lot of detail in my father's book, which my father could not resist because his speeches are wonderful.
I see.
And he was an extraordinary figure. He was just, he shifted positions, he attacked the Congress, and I think he emerges from my father's book as one of the most exciting personalities. But my father actually got the Congress to pass a vote of no confidence in him, which expresses my father's personality to a T. I often think I wouldn't have done that.
So some of these guys have actually crossed swords with your dad. Are you in touch with their kids? Do you have a good equation? No. Unfortunately. If you could, you would have.
Yeah. I don't know. We didn't form that sort of alliance. No. I knew Zafruddin's daughters.
I see.
But we all parted ways. Indian diaspora happened in Kenya. We just, even though it was
out of Kenya.
No, it wasn't as dramatic as Uganda.
Okay.
But
everyone went.
Everyone went. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. Everyone went.
So when you talk about the Indian population in a place like Kenya, and so much is heard about it, do you feel it's studied sufficiently, understood sufficiently, or not?
No, but it's being now, and magazines like Awaz are playing a wonderful part.
So Awaz comes out of Nairobi?
It comes out of Nairobi 3 times a year, I think.
Okay.
3 or 4, and it attracts all of these diasporic figures,
I see.
as well as Asians in Kenya and East Africa. Writers from all over. Benedita Ferrao, he writes for Awaz. Then Benegal Pereira put a very nice together a very nice anthology on his father, Eddie Pereira, who was a very unusual figure. So attention now. A real attempt, I think, is being made to understand the Indian community.
All this time, writing and publishing was probably not so easy in that sense. Now it's happening now.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Now it's happening. And then, of course, the internet has made a huge difference.
True.
Because material can flow so easily and receive such widespread attention.
Thanks and for all your time and all the best on this.
Thanks for interviewing me.